What's the latest with Auburn potentially landing a 5-star quarterback?
You are Locked On Auburn, your daily podcast on the Auburn Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome on into Locked On Auburn, your daily Auburn Tigers podcast. I'm your host, Zach Blackerby, and thank you so much for making Locked On Auburn your first listen every single day. It's a Recruiting Thursday, as we are joined every week by the Brian Smith, the Locked On recruiting expert, as well as Auburn recruiting writer at auburndaily.com. Recruiting coverage throughout the Locked On Podcast Network is brought to you by LinkedIn. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. That's why LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. Check it out for free. LinkedIn.com/LockedOnCollege. Brian, it's another time you and I talk, so we're going to start with Juju Lewis, Auburn's pursuit of their quarterback for the 2025 class. You've had conversations with folks throughout the week, and you still think Auburn is in it for the 5-star quarterback that's currently committed to USC.
That's right. The Carrollton High School prospect is probably going to pick Auburn or Southern Cal from everything I heard. I was at OT7 7-on-7 event this past weekend.
Yeah.
One of the guys that I spoke to there said Auburn is making a major move. It's nothing that I hadn't heard, but it was nice to hear from a different source and somebody that's, knows the guys, in the circuit. I'll leave it at that. And it's just consistent information. When you meet numerous people with the same info, but these people don't have anything in common, they don't know each other, that's a good sign. So Auburn right now, they have to like their position because they're 2 hours away compared to USC being a 4-hour plane flight. You know what I mean?
Well, and Juju, you've talked to him several times now. Do you think location matters for him?
Well, it's interesting that you said that. Like, his only concern, and he admitted this to my buddy John Garcia, somebody you know well as well.
Sure. Right.
When John interviewed him, he said the one thing is I need to go out to LA and kind of get used to it. Being a 17-year-old in LA is kind of different. He's from Carrollton, Georgia. It's 20 minutes from the Alabama border on Interstate 20.
Right. Yeah, right.
It's a basic small town in the South. There's no way they can prepare him for that, and he may not want to do that in the end. There's nothing wrong with SC. It's not that. It's just the offense is great. Now they've recruited him well, but they know that it's a long way from home. And I know they've got backup plans in case they don't get him. So I think that's a factor. And it's certainly not going to hurt Auburn because it's the happy medium. Like, he's not right down the street from mom, so she's going to drive him nuts.
Yeah.
But at the same time, he could go home on the weekend if he wanted.
You said something interesting there. You said USC has backup plans, kind of, they're looking at that just in case it goes this way. Do you think they always had a backup plan? Is this something they would have done anyway, or are they doing this in response to Juju Lewis Auburn hype, really growing?
I think it's a little of both. In today's era, if you're not looking all the time, you're failing yourself.
100%. Sure.
Look, there are kids committed to Auburn right now taking visits and stuff. It's a two-way street. Yeah, if it's an elite player, fair or not, they hold the cards. Juju's one of those guys. A lot of the coaches probably don't like it, but there are only a handful of them. It's called supply and demand.
Yeah.
So, I know from talking to an SC source, somebody who's very entrenched there, that they have a couple of options, but that doesn't mean that they're actively going, like, they want Juju. Make no mistake about it. That's their guy, but they're also realistic from what I'm told. We may not win this.
Mm-hmm.
And that's from the USC side of things. I'm just passing along the info. So again, that's a great sign for Auburn. You're in it. And like we joked about this the other day on the phone, neither one of us thought Auburn was going to be in this position 2-3 months ago.
No, we were doing these segments just to throw in something like, hey, maybe we can generate some excitement kind of thing. And then all of a sudden Auburn, I'll say it. I think if I had to pick right now, I think Juju Lewis ends up in Auburn's class. Are you at that point?
I would agree.
You're at that point. You think Auburn is the favorite
after this weekend,
point?
Having yet another random person tell me that owes me zero, offered it to me.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, that's really interesting information. Mm-hmm. I'm fine with that. But again, it's still a long way to December. The only thing that I'm concerned about, and this is something that every school wants, especially with quarterback, you want that done in the summer because it helps you recruit other kids. I don't think Julian Lewis honestly knows when he's going to make a final decision and not take any more visits. That's the only concern I have, because you're not going to be able to maximize your class unless he's openly and publicly committed to only one school and visits only one school. But even at that, there probably aren't 5 kids that I've ever seen in high school football more accurate than him. So it's just, he throws it on time, throws a catchable ball, it's a quick release, he post-snap reads. Like, he has been trained to do one thing, play quarterback, and he's good at it. So I think Auburn's going to be all in no matter what. It would sting if they didn't get him, but you're not going to beat the Alabamas and Georgias and LSUs of the world without an elite quarterback in today's world. You're not. So I think Auburn has to go all in on this anyway. So we'll see how it plays out.
Let me ask you this, Brian, because this was a big, probably the most common comment when we talked about Juju Lewis this time a week ago. And the question was, what about Walker White? What about Hank Brown? Because we talked about, like, is Juju good enough to come in and start right away? And you said it in a longer version, but you said yes. You said he's talented, he's special, he's very, very good. What do you say to the fans and asset? You've covered recruiting in a bunch of different places for a very long time. What do you say to the Auburn fan whose question and response is, what about Walker White, the guy you just brought in?
Well, there's 2 ways to look at it. You want to keep your depth chart, but so does every other school. A friend of mine in the industry always says on his podcast, the answer is never one or the other. It's always both. He goes, because quarterbacks are going to transfer anyway. Kids will not wait, especially with the portal, and you do not have to sit out a year now. Forget it. You're going to lose 50% of your quarterbacks at minimum over a 4-year period. The only way that you don't is it's a kid who knows he's not good enough and he just wants the degree. Okay, whatever. He's just taking up a spot anyway. You want him to leave. It's just true. And then the other situation is a kid's just good enough to think, maybe I'll play a little bit. I'll just get my master's, go into coaching. You have a little of that. But everybody else leaves.
Yeah, sure.
So if Walker White's not the guy and Juju beats him out and he transfers, it is what it is. You still have Juju Lewis starting. If you have a guy that's a freshman, comes in and starts, you can't complain. So who cares? Not everybody can start at Auburn or any other school. I care less. Best man plays. You Freeze will be happy with it. If you's happy with it, you, me, and everybody else that follow and cover Auburn should be happy too.
Yeah, I'm with you. So that's the latest on Juju Lewis. Seems like Auburn continues to trend for the 5-star quarterback. Auburn, like a thief in the night, stole a very talented linebacker from the state of Mississippi. We'll talk about Tyler Lockhart in just a moment, right here on Locked On Auburn. Today's show brought to you by our friends at Yahoo Finance. It's become one of my favorite apps, especially when I open up my finance folder in my phone. I love pulling up Yahoo Finance. They've got a bunch of news as well as all of my investments in one place. So if you want to grow your portfolio to deal with the rising cost of inflation, Yahoo Finance is the best to help you put you in the right spot and give you tools to reach that financial freedom. And when it comes to your financial future, you think you've done it all. You've saved, you've researched, you've invested what you can. Now you need to take those investments to the next level, and Yahoo Finance can help you do that. For over 25 years, Yahoo Finance has been the brand behind every great investor. They're the #1 finance destination, producing a holistic look at the financial news cycles, including breaking news, original editorial perspectives, analyst ratings, and a ton more. They've got a community of over 90 million users each month. I'm one of them. Their real strength is helping you on your way to financial success. For comprehensive financial news and analysis, visit the brand behind every great investor. That's yahoofinance.com. Yahoofinance.com. Once again, yahoofinance.com. It's Recruiting Thursday. Brian Smith, Locked On Recruiting Insider, as well as recruiting expert at auburndaily.com as well. I mean, I was in bed when the news broke. Tyler Lockhart, who was a Mississippi State lock, commits to Auburn. He commits to Auburn, and there's stories up about him being excited. He couldn't keep it a surprise anymore, and he couldn't wait to publicly commit to Auburn and all that good stuff. But I mean, this is the guy I didn't really know a whole lot about, Brian, because it came out of nowhere, but you turn on his tape and oh my goodness, is this guy talented?
Yeah, I saw him a few weeks ago at Under Armour Nashville, and I'd seen his film, but it's another thing to see a kid from 5 feet away.
Sure, yeah.
His ability to do the hoop drill, to dip and rip, and just change direction. And he's at least 6'2.5", 6'3". He's listed at 6'4". He's 200 pounds, 205. Like, this is the guy that Alabama and Georgia have signed at linebacker for 15 years. That's what this kid is. Now, how well he progresses, that's up to him and the coaching staff. But like off a computer screen, this is what you want. And he's built like it. He's kind of built like Cam Coleman with just a little more weight. Like, he is a freaky athlete, explosive in the open field. He listened to the coaches. He changed what he was doing when they asked. Like, give me all of these that you want to give me. Give me all the Tyler Lockharts you got. So Auburn needs more speed and more depth at linebacker. That's an important part of this recruiting class. They got freshmen playing in the 2 deep already, which always concerns you.
Sure.
They need another class that has some studs. Lockhart fits the bill. And I'm sure the people in the state of Mississippi are not very happy right now.
I mean, what do you make of that? What do you make of Auburn going in to another SEC program, I guess 2 SEC programs backyard, and pulling this off? I mean, surprising a ton of folks. Mississippi State fans, not happy, which I love, but they are not happy when this news dropped. What do you make of Hugh Freeze and the staff pulling off something like this?
I'm not surprised at all. You're going to get 1 or 2 kids a year out of Mississippi. Don't always have to be as good as Lockhart, but Auburn's made it a priority, and they have multiple guys on the staff that have connections to the state, including Freeze himself. So I don't think Auburn fans should be shocked, but they've been through such a lull in terms of the program before you got here. I think they're a little surprised. And then that's probably one of the reasons that Mississippi State and Ole Miss fans are like, what just happened? Mm-hmm. So, I mean, there's still a long way to go to signing day, but him committing like he did out of the blue. I remember you sent me a text. I'm like, where did this come from? And I'm like, I don't know. So I was like, I didn't see that coming. I hadn't heard anything about it. Right. Maybe it was just a decision that he finally popped on, because he's not the most talkative kid, but sure, he's not really that far from Auburn. It's like 4 or 5 hours away. It's no big deal. And it's the state over. So Auburn should always be expected to get a couple of kids. And no offense to State and Ole Miss, it's not like they're traditional SEC juggernauts. They're not. So Auburn, they usually beat both those schools. So I think it's something that Auburn needs to get accustomed to. If they're going to beat Georgia or Alabama consistently, you got to get some of these kids.
Yeah, they need to win Mississippi. No question. No question about it. As far as, I think in a perfect world, you're a few years away from him playing a bunch of snaps. He might be in the rotation his freshman or sophomore year. It'll depend on, what this freshman class upcoming year does and who comes back and all that stuff. But as far as how you anticipate him being used, you wrote about this at auburndaily.com, positional flexibility. Yep. What exactly do you mean by that? What do you see him doing at the SEC level?
Well, because every team runs different packages to match up with, 12 personnel, 5 wide, whatever it is.
Sure.
You need linebackers that are what we now call 3-down backers. If they come out and play power football, he can hang. But if you're running wheel routes with a really twitchy running back, he's got to be able to hang with that too. Linebacker is hard in today's world. He's got the speed already. I've seen that with my own 2 eyes. Just needs to add a little weight. But he can be your overhang linebacker / hybrid. As he gets bigger, he can eventually move to will, meaning weak side linebacker. And he might end up playing both. Mm-hmm. So he's 200-ish, give or take now, maybe 205. 2 years in Auburn's program, he'll be 228, 232, something like that. You could pretty much play him at Mike if you wanted. Just depends on how you want to use him. The biggest part, though, that I like, just watching the way he bends and the way he changes direction laterally, it's going to be a pass rusher. You may be 3rd and 8. You might just say, we're going to put 3 men down and 2 outside linebackers and come. He'll be one of your 2 guys.
Yeah.
Him and Jamonte. Like him and Waller on each side, I'm good.
It's a lot to handle. Yeah.
And by the way, the Mississippi connection right there. So that's
sure. JJ Falk will be on that front 7 too at that point as well. So there's going to be a lot to handle. I mean, Auburn's defensive front 7, I mentioned this on the show, I guess yesterday, but when you look at, according to On3, their top 4 rated players in this class are all front 7 players. JJ Falk, Tyler Lockhart, Jordan Crawford, and Malik Autry. And you just talk about how you win football games.
You got to do it right there, brother.
That's a big part of it. It's a big
Yeah,
part
I
of it.
mean, how many times have we heard Saban or Kirby or Brian Kelly or somebody else say, "Look, you got to have linemen, you got to win in there." Like the guys that are going to playoff games, etc. There's a reason they say that stuff. You know, you got to have the guy up front that's just going to beat the bejesus out of somebody. And
Right.
Tyler Lockhart is definitely one of them.
Yep, he's a dude. All right, so with the addition of Lockhart, Auburn is sitting with the 9th ranked recruiting class in the country, 4th in the SEC, which is, I mean, that certainly gets you in the conversation, but you look at where Auburn has room to move up, and it's certainly there. We already talked about Juju Lewis. Adding a 5-star quarterback will certainly, allow you to move up the rankings. You got to think they're going to land some of these receivers, especially if they get the quarterback that they want. You and I both think Alvin Henderson will flip from Penn State to Auburn at some point before early signing day. There's a talk about Auburn getting multiple running backs, so that's going to help you in the class because running backs, there's a lot of highly rated running backs out there. So, I mean, what do you think is next for Auburn? And realistically, like, can this be a top 5 class when it's all said and done? Broderick Scholl, a 4-star offensive tackle who everybody's kind of putting crystal balls and predictions for to end up at Auburn. I mean, this class, the room for growth and improvement in this class is very, very clear.
I think that Auburn is one of the highest ceilings in the country. Number one, it starts with Lewis. That's not really a stretch to figure that out. He's top 10 by everybody.
Sure.
But offensive tackle, it's finally, I know that you loved hearing this. It's a priority, and it's something they're actually achieving. If they get Scholl to go with the other guys I got, I mean, that's about as good a grade as you're going to get. They're going to get an A. So you would conquer that, and you're also going to have a class, like you said, they're going to get 1 or 2 good running backs. They're in on several guys that are edge players, etc. I don't see a place you go, man, there's no way they're going to fill their need here. Every spot they're recruiting, either they already have somebody or they're close on somebody. It's going to be a balanced class. That's the other thing that a lot of us in the recruiting industry talk about. Do you have holes?
Right.
I don't think they're going to finish with that. So even receiver, after what they had last year, they're in on enough guys. They're going to get a dude. They've already got a great tight end, etc. I think Auburn conservatively should be a top 10 recruiting class. If they get Juju and a couple of these other guys that'll come down to the wire, it could be number 3, 4, or 5 in the country. Yeah. So you got to win the end of the year though. That's November, December. And you got to get all your cards in a row right now to make that happen.
Yeah, I mean, the holes point is super important because you look at what happened with Gus Malzahn. He was consistently 8, 9, 10th, somewhere around there in recruiting. But what did he not ever get?
Offensive tackles.
Offensive tackles. And Brian, do you need those to win?
Yes. A lot of them, actually.
I think so. Let's take a look at this roster, Brian. What else do they need to do in the transfer portal? All that coming up right here on Locked On Auburn. Today's show is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. FanDuel's America's #1 sports book. It's winner take all time in the NBA and the NHL. And FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. And by more, I mean Anthony Edwards. Just bet on Anthony Edwards and the T-Wolves. Holy cow, that guy has been fun to watch. So visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn. Make every playoff shot count. FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook. Final few minutes of today's edition of Locked On Auburn. Brian Smith hanging out with us. Hugh Freeze consistently says he believes the magic number, the right number for your roster, is to have 16 scholarship offensive linemen. They got the 16th scholarship offensive lineman with Ronan Chambers, the transfer from Akron earlier this week. So offensive line is done. When you look at Auburn's roster, is there any kind of glaring weakness or anything that you think, okay, they need to bolster depth here, or they need to kind of do any sort of thing they can do at this point of the offseason, which is late? You're pretty limited in what you can do. And I think the roster is pretty much done, Brian. But in your mind, what else do you think this coaching staff needs to do?
If they could have got another depth piece in the front seven, they're not the deepest team at linebacker or D tackle.
Sure.
But I mean, I'm being really picky. The 3 guys I got up front, and just like overall, they got every level of the team, really. They got somebody in the portal. Quarterbacks to the exception because they got Thorne last year. They didn't need to. He was a 2-year guy. it's pretty surprising to me because I didn't think they would reach this point when we were talking. I remember being on the field watching them practice. I'm like, I don't know about this. Then they went and got several guys. Like we were hoping they would get 1 D tackle. Maybe. Yeah. They got 2, and they got a pass rusher. Mm-hmm. They may have done better along the D line than any team in the country in the portal. It's certainly in the conversation in the spring window.
Yeah, and I like the way they did it because it's going to fly under the radar a little bit. Like I think Phillip Bleedy and Isaiah Riggs, like I think they're solid players. They're not superstars. They're not, must-start guys in, 90% of the programs throughout college football, but they're really solid college football players. And I think that's exactly what Auburn needed up front because now they've got the depth. They've got the depth with those 2 guys and Jason Jones and Trill Carter and Gage Keys. And then, you get to talk about the very talented freshmen as well. It's just, it's a good situation. It's a good situation up front. As far as the depth goes, did they raise the ceiling of this team? I don't know. But you and I were concerned about that SEC stretch of like, what are they going to be able to do as far as stopping the run? Certainly helps with that.
When you have a guy like Riggs, and for people that don't know, he was at A&M. He was a straight up zero technique in a 3-4 nose guard. That is a large human being. If you do not double team him, bad things may happen to your quarterback. And when you have a guy that can do that, whether it's a 4-3 or 3-4 scheme, it changes what the linebackers and everybody else does. So he may get 1 tackle in a game and be your most valuable defender. Yeah, it's a weird thing, but coaches talk about this sometimes, and people want to see the tackles and the sacks. He's going to get doubled too much to make that, but the guy right behind him at linebacker is taking him to dinner. So those are the kinds of things you need. And then Bleedy's he's 295. It's not like he's a small fella.
Yeah.
You had 2 experienced guys like that combined for like 620 pounds. Okay. I get it. Now the question is, how are they going to rotate and who's going to move, how are they going to do things? And that's a good thing to talk about because in spring, we're like, I just hope they get through this because we might have a freshman starting before the end of the year if anybody gets hurt. Never a good sign at D tackle. So I'm wondering a much better spot.
Yeah, I'm wondering if they try to get another corner just because we've seen them reach out to 2 corners. They wanted to host Cole, Javion, I think was his first name, Cole, who ended up committing to Texas. They had him scheduled for an official visit. Obviously, that didn't happen because he committed to Texas. But then they also, I think it was on 3, reported that Auburn was one of the schools that reached out to Pons, I believe was his last name.
DeAndre Pons, yeah.
Yeah, he was from JMU, and he committed either to Indiana or Wisconsin. Indiana. Yeah, some school that wears red up there. And so I do kind of wonder, like, do they want another corner? I mean, because they've reached out to 2 that we know of. That's probably a sign that they want a corner.
Experience at corner, man. Yeah, there's no hiding out there. I get it. I think Auburn's secondary is pretty good, though.
Yeah, me too.
Having enough depth is always the key. Being able to rotate and keep guys fresh. It's not the same attrition as you have a D tackle, but you lose a corner, man. This guy goes down with an ankle injury or something. You miss him for 3 weeks. It's rough. Yeah. So I understand.
Yeah. I mean, Auburn kind of benefited from that depth last year with Kay and Lee. Nehemiah Pritchett missed longer or, more games to start the season than we all expected him to, but you had Kay and Lee there who was excellent. He was excellent. And so what does that look like? Who's that next guy? Who's the Kay and Lee this year? I think it's Crawford. I think he's fantastic.
He's good.
He's very good. Every time I watched him in spring, it looks like he was doing stuff. So we'll see. But they've got plenty of candidates of guys who could step up if they don't add one. But they've got scholarships to give. We'll see if they can get to that 85 mark. They've got a few to go. So, Brian, thank you so much for your time as always. How can people check out everything that you've got going on?
auburndaily.com. We're on that home stretch to the official visits. Going to start breaking down the guys that are coming in to visit the Tigers and talk a little bit about SEC recruiting, kind of who the Tigers are competing with for the top class in the conference.
Yep. And please like the video. Please subscribe. And we'll see you tomorrow. This has been Locked On Auburn.